Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Simply Trade News Roundup. I'm here. My name's Annik. I'm your host today. And we do this weekly. You should know by now if you have been listening. And I have a guest with me today, which I always do. And I'm very excited about it because he has not come on with me, as most of them haven't, because I haven't been doing the news for that long. But here we are. We have Chris Scalisi on the News Roundup, and really your expertise in helping companies navigate global trade challenges, especially through these times, I feel like, right? So you do this strategically, and you have a passion for it. I read all on your LinkedIn. I feel like it was less businessy and it was more heartfelt the way you wrote it, which is nice. I think we need that, especially nowadays, right? And so thank you for coming on. I'm very excited. And we get to talk about lots of nice things.
No, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And you're absolutely right. It is, it's this occupation, this job that I do, it is a gift of passion. It really is. I love helping companies, navigate through these uncertain times. Even before all this happened, there's a lot of things that these companies have to deal with when it comes down to trade compliance, having those correct HS codes. Are they following the correct rules? Looking at opportunities. And I enjoy that. And it's a lot of problem solving. I work with a great team over at Mohawk Global Trade Advisors. They are so talented and amazing. And they're like I said, they're like superheroes with expertise of all different types of niches.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm glad because I think this fits right into what we'll be talking about. So here on the News Roundup, again, guys, we try to talk about the news weekly. Sometimes it carries on into the next week. There's so much happening in the industry. We really can't plan ahead. But we did have some exciting things happening this week. So we're going to, and I don't think I've said this many times on the podcast this past weeks because not much was this exciting, but it is, guys. We have a trade deal, UK and US. So let me just jump into that. So US and UK goods trade totaled $148 billion in 2024. We've obviously seen some tariffs, but with this trade deal, we take some of the tariffs back. We have automotive exports. The UK can send up to 100,000 vehicles annually at the 10% tariff. Anything above that gets hit with 25%, unfortunately. But you know what? We'll take it, right? We'll have the steel and aluminum from the UK now enters US tariff-free. That's incredible compared to the previous 25%. That's some money saved there. Pharmaceuticals, aerospace parts, and Rolls-Royce engines also benefit from tariff reductions. I think any trade deal to me at this point is a success for the US. And I kind of want to discuss this because we've seen a little bit of a shift this week. So what do you think of this US UK trade deal?
I am thrilled to death about this. And I think this is the first domino to fall with additional trade deals that are going to follow afterwards. One of the things that I look back to is going back to TPP, right? The Trans-Pacific Partnership. And during the Trump administration, we pulled out, right? And we left those countries, Canada, Mexico, some of the Asian countries. And then actually it was UK that joined in 2023, right? And become part of known as the CTPP, right? And so by bringing this together, the US and the UK under this free trade agreement or this trade deal, it's going to only open up new opportunities for both countries, but it's going to create more of a greater bond and opportunity for both countries to work collaboratively together. Obviously, we're going to see a lot of our allies countries, more of these trade deals are going to follow suit, like as we saw with USMCA with Canada and Mexico. So I think we're going in the positive direction, and it's very exciting to see, especially with steel and aluminum. We'll take it with cars; it's a great start, and we'll go from there. So it just feels like the people in the trade community, probably a lot of people you talk on the podcast, everybody's kind of like, oh my gosh, we got to run risk analysis. What's our exposure? What's going on? Where are the companies being hit? But and the nice thing about it is we are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. We're seeing that these agreements are starting to come to fruition. We saw Howard Lutnick on CNBC yesterday. He was smiles from ear to ear. He's excited, and this is something we're going to see more of these trade deals to follow. So.
Yeah. I do want to mention that this is not a full trade deal. So it's more like a new trade arrangement, right? So why can you say that? I mean, I don't know if we get an answer for this, but why do you think they won't strike a full trade deal just yet? Do you think we're still kind of on the fence? They're figuring it out, or?
Yep. I think I think a lot of these are going to be like that. We're not going to have like a equivalent to like the USMCA. I think we're going to see more of these trade arrangements that are going to be made to push us in the right direction. And then these will start to be tweaked over a period of time. So it's actually a step in the right direction. It's not kind of like a full blown, let's just do a free trade and collaborate fully. But let's start with this arrangement and see where things go, how we can measure it and see, where things are going, where's the growth of the companies are doing business with one another. And when I heard and when I read about it, it seems very positive. Like I said, there is some pushback on the U.S. There's one other thing I wanted to add too. There was an agreement about the U.K. purchasing aircraft components and products from Boeing, which is great. I think it was like $10 billion. So we're actually, I like the working in collaboration that these countries are creating with one another. And it's one of those things that can be modified as we progressively move down the road.
Yeah, because you said a little bit of pushback. I love that you said that with the Boeing. I think that's incredible. Having these businesses work with each other and helping each other out as countries. That's really, I think, what the main goal is. But there are a few restrictions. So UK tariffs on US meat, poultry, and dairy remain high. So this sometimes over 125%. So that will definitely be still challenging for U.S. exporters and a little bit of a barrier, right? But again, we're still at the beginning stages. So hopefully that might change. So this is not a set in stone trade deal, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. And I think this will be modified as time progresses. And like I said, it's something to start. It's a baseline to start with, and it's something that we'll build upon as we go along.
Yeah. And again, and I kind of want to stick with UK real quick because the UK, they created a free trade agreement with India. And last episode, I was talking to Lenny Feldman on what the trade deal, because there was, which trade deal is going to be happening. Lutnick said something. They created this trade deal and we didn't know who. And I kept saying, we need India. I didn't think that was going to happen just yet, but UK just did a free trade agreement with India. And it seems like this is really going to benefit the UK tremendously. So do you see that in the future for the United States? Because I know we want to move away from China. And again, you had some news on China as well, because I think Trump just posted on Truth Social something that he wants to get done for China.
Yes, so he did. And that's exciting. So they're meeting this weekend in Switzerland. And actually, it's so funny how a matter of, as we know in our business, wait, you blink and it's going to change again. So yesterday, they came to Trump and they said, with the meetings coming up this weekend in Switzerland, will you drop the 145% tariffs? He said no, right? So today, right, as you mentioned, and Truth Social, he said that 80% would be a good baseline. So for that to change within the last 24 hours, it's kind of like there's a little give to say, kind of almost like extending that olive branch to saying, let's have that discussion. Let's see if we can work through this and decouplate some of this escalation between both countries. But by them lowering from 145 to 80, it's kind of saying we're willing to come to the table. Let's have a conversation. So I'm really happy to see that. Going back to your question about India, absolutely. I see opportunities with India, Vietnam, Japan, Malaysia. A lot of those, Indo-Pacific, South Korea, which we had an agreement with. But I think there's going to be one of those things. It's not going to be a full-blown free trade agreement like we've had in the past, but it's going to be like an agreement with stipulations on both sides for countries that's going to be measured, and then calculated risks will be done, and then they'll decide whether they want to go forward or pull back on.
Yeah, and I always ask this question, and because China has just been such a struggle to trade with nowadays. And now that we know, UK is striking a deal with India, and, we might be moving away from China. And we've been telling businesses, maybe you should look at your supply chain. How can you move to another country, or, make a better working supply chain? Do you think that is a good idea for businesses that are using China to move to India already, even if there's no trade deal at hand right now?
In my opinion, I think unfortunately companies need to hold tight for the time being. I know there was a lot of talk about reshoring, where a lot of companies that were actually going from China to Mexico, or actually, believe it or not, Costa Rica and some parts of Central America, Latin America. But one of the things that we're seeing, that there's changes in the global landscape, right? So as Vietnam, for example, we see a lot of countries that were leaving China and going to Vietnam. In my opinion, I think it's one of those things to kind of hold tight. I think China, there's a tremendous opportunity. One of the things we forget about, China is a huge market, with over 1.4 billion people. And then they say, well, economically, that it doesn't compare to like the US. What products are they going to buy? I disagree. I mean, there's such a rise of middle class in China that we're seeing that there's investments in healthcare, education. I worked 10 years ago. This was emerging when in the healthcare industry, when we were helping U.S. medical device companies sell into that market. We saw the rise of private hospitals. We saw, the rise of families investing in their children's education. So there's resources and service and such. But I just wanted to add one more thing that I was going to say. I just lost that thought. But this is very important. The latest stat that came out yesterday in regards to China's exports, even though our exports from China to the U.S. have dropped significantly, China's exports around the world were 8.3% higher in April. Number one and number two, China is the exporter to over 120 different countries beside the United States, which is, they're still producing goods and they're still selling throughout the world.
I know. China has such a bad reputation, but I do think there's so much potential, like you said. And I just think it's, the forced labor and whatnot. There's so many structural things that, kind of go into, obviously, these tariffs. But I really hope they can figure out a certain trade deal to make it work, because it's such a huge asset for the United States. Even if we do have India, if we have Vietnam, trade relations are so important with anyone. But of course, you don't want to highlight forced labor and say, that's fine. You go ahead, we'll trade with you. So it's definitely difficult, but I do see your point. And I think I'm hopeful that there will be a deal at some point.
I think so. And I really believe in it, because one of the things I've always been a strong advocate of a buy local, trade regional, and sell global approach. And it's really been almost like where you can focus on, taking the best shop, having the ability to shop the best products and the best services for around the world without any type of barriers, but be able to trade them regionally and then bring them locally to your market. And it's just, it's one of those things. If we're having great trade relations with our country, everybody eats, everybody wins, everybody grows, and we all work together. And we bring the best of the best products and technologies together, and we evolve as one Earth, I guess you could say, right? We're citizens of the world, not just citizens of a country. So that's how we got to look at ourselves.
And in that sense, so there's been a lot of updates, right? And I haven't been talking about this, I think, because there's also a lot of impacts that we don't see, that you send a lot of articles actually to me about, and I'm so grateful for, because it involved Target, McDonald's. I mean, just a lot of companies that are seeing the effects of the tariffs, and we see a lot of consumers backing up. And we don't talk a lot about consumers, but unfortunately, consumers are are taking the impact of our industry. So I want to say it's a little supply chain, conga line, whatever we're in right now. But consumers are the end effect. So they are not buying as many things right now, because things are the price is increasing. Some companies are unsure what to do at the moment because of the tariffs. What are you seeing right now, and what is your conclusion on this?
Yeah, and this is really fascinating. And I'll tell you, just a quick step on back on history. We as a country has always been a consumer driven economy, right? So it really actually started in like Bretton Woods after World War II. When we started rebuilding Europe, we had this boom. As we know, the baby boomers, they moved out to the suburbs, they had family, they built houses, they were buying goods and services, and it just evolved and exploded from there, right? But an interesting statistics came out that caught my eye back in 2017. And it was during the Trump administration, we saw that there was full employment. The economy was on fire, right? It was going on all cylinders. We did not have inflation, all pre-COVID, right? But this article that came out and said, and I was blown away by this, that said 40% of Americans, that if there was an emergency that happened of $600, unexpected, car breaks down, the pet gets sick, or whatever it may happen, right? They could not afford that. Now, this was in 2017 when everything was all, at full, we were at our height, right? Now, fast forward, COVID comes in. We have money injected into the global economy. We have record deficits. Now what happens is we have inflation that takes off. Now people are still weathering through the storm. Now fast forward to this time when we start seeing discretionary spending starting to drop right around January, February, right? McDonald's, for example, announced that they were at their lowest level since 2020, right? In their sales. A silly statistic such as SiriusXM, they recently announced that 320,000 subscribers voluntarily just stopped using their service. So things like that, we look at discretionary income because people are like, well, these are people that may not have the emergency money. They have the emergency money, but now they're even pulling back. So as people are starting to pull back, it's going to create a ripple effect of saying that there could be some layoffs down the road from these other companies. So as you're utilizing less services or purchasing less goods, we're starting to see some layoffs that affected. And I'm seeing that more actually in the larger multinational companies that are playing more of a footprint in the global front than I am more in the SMEs. I mean, we're seeing SMEs that were affected with some of these tariffs coming in, but I see that more in the multinational, which will eventually trickle down to the smaller ones.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because I think that's what I've been hearing, the small businesses not being able to buy certain things from China. Because, I mean, who can pay 125% if you're barely even making your ends meet with your small business? You're out of business at that point. You can't price that high. Consumers are not going to buy it, especially, where we're at right now. So how is that relation? So do you see a lot of multinational companies fail they have enough money to stay afloat?
They do. They have enough money to stay afloat, but I see them more representing more in layoffs and job cuts in there. Multinational, the small to mid-sized companies that are purchasing that were depending on China. For example, let's say like a polyester T-shirt that they were getting for $6 is now selling for over $18. I mean, because of the tariff. So that's a huge thing, and that's like you look at those costs. First of all, how is a consumer going to pay that cost? As we say, oh no, the administration's saying it's being passed to the companies. It's not. It's being passed down to the consumer, and the consumer is going to vote with their dollar. They're going to decide saying, well, I'm not not going out to dinner. I'm cutting back on some of my discretionary income. And if I see something jump up to 145, 150%, I'm certainly not going to be paying those costs as well. So,
and talking about businesses right now in trade, what do you tell them at the moment? Because, I mean, some are struggling, some are not struggling at all. I'm telling you, lawyers in trade doing great, consultant doing amazing, duty drawback, fantastic. There's that sector that's, we're just, I don't even want to say thank you, but it's like, thank you, because we're doing great. But then on the other side, we see these companies who are actually struggling. And it's kind of sad because there's no medium right now. There's only one side that's doing great because they're helping them, and one side who needs the help, who is actually suffering. So what do you tell them at the moment? Like in a strategic way, there's not much you can say because you don't always know what is going to happen, but in what way can you help them at the moment?
That's a great question, Annik. And one of the things I do, you got to look at this. These are unprecedented times. This is something we've never seen before. People that I've talked to that in the industry 30, 40 plus years says we never experienced anything like this before. I think the biggest uprising was more when NAFTA was going to be torn up and it was going to be changed to USMCA. And now we have turmoil going over just a matter of less than 3 months away. But strategically, companies can really take advantage of this. First thing they can do is to take a step back and look at their products and look at their 10-digit tariff numbers and really take a step back, whether they're importing from China, Vietnam, Canada, Mexico, take a step back and look at those tariff numbers and see if they're correct. That's the first thing to do. And a lot of times they aren't. And that's the funny thing because there was not this turmoil that was happening. So it was business as usual, right? So what happens is they need to evaluate what their tariff number is correct. Now, keep in mind, I'm going to give a warning to everybody out there. We don't want to say tariff re-engineering because what's going to happen is there's people out there that will say, oh, let's look at your tariffs and say, oh, are you paying too much or too little? Customs is onto that. So Customs is hiring, auditors. They're hiring specialists. That's one agency that DOJ is not touching. They're hiring more people and expanding to more on the enforcement side. So what we're doing is more of saying, step one, look at your tariffs, look at and see if that's the baseline it's like, I call that ground zero to what the outcome of where you're going to be, who you're trading with and so on. Second step is to look at your free trade agreements. The one free trade agreement we have right now, USMCA. So our friends in Canada, they're doing a lot of outreach to their Canadian manufacturing companies that are selling not only to the US, but other parts around the world and offering support to saying, hey, look at your tariff numbers. Look at if you're trading with US and Mexico, look at your USMCA agreements that make sure that you're not, you're in compliance, you're doing reasonable care, and you're making sure that everything's well documented and such. So they're offering those services and guidance so they can help these companies be successful. I'm pushing that same approach too by saying, yes, tariff numbers, those free trade agreements. Secondly, evaluate your supply chain. Where are the pull of your countries of where you're importing from, but at the same time, where you're exporting to. The best companies in the world are importing and exporting at the same time, where obviously this new agreement with the UK, maybe there's new opportunity to bring products that you never had the opportunity to sell before. So it creates more of a balance.
Love that thought. That's a great thought. Yeah.
Yep. Make lemonade out of lemons. You gotta do it.
Make lemonade out of lemons. Exactly. That's a great way to look at the trade industry right now. We didn't even mention the unstacking stacking. I don't even want to get into it because we don't even have that much of time. And we covered it in my last one. Even though we have what exactly it is, but I think there's still more to follow, more information to come. But it's interesting because that's going to add a whole nother layer to what we're already doing, correct?
Yes, it will. It will definitely create another layer as well. And that, the bond companies are doing reach outs and they're doing seminars to make sure that people are not going through bond saturation, to make sure that they're utilizing, if you have a $50,000 bond, that you have enough bond that's covering those duties that you're being paid.
Yeah. And hopefully it'll eliminate some of the tariffs, the unstack. They call it unstacking. Some called it stacking. And so I call it unstacking stacking because certainly you're unstacking, but then you're stacking again. So I'm like, what is it essentially? But it's the process of it all, I always say. And I kind of want to wrap it up here. I think you gave such a great ending speech with what companies should be aware of and how they should treat this entirety of it. And with that, I also want to say, I did want to mention this in the beginning. It's not trade related. I guess it's worldwide news that we have a new pope and he's American from Chicago. But I do have to say also he's a very multinational leader, I would say, because he's also a dual citizen of Peru, which is amazing. I mean, the languages he can. Isn't that awesome? Yes, the languages he can speak, and so intelligent. Open-minded. I love having a Gen Z or so. We love every open-minded person out in the world. So. I did want to mention that. And secondly, what else did I want to mention? Oh, okay. We're talking about a lot about trade action strategies, I think, here. And that's kind of what you do too, helping companies strategize. And we actually do have a webinar coming up May 20th. It's actually 3 days, but it's just 1 hour. 1 hour really a day with Cindy Allen talking about trade actions and kind of helping people navigate through this because there's so much going on and companies are some people are confused in the compliance industry because you want to do the right thing because you might end up paying millions of dollars. Even if you're thinking I'm doing the right thing, you're not even doing it maliciously. You're just need to stay educated in this time or, get someone to help you and all the good things. So we're doing that. It's $249, I think, dollars. Not sure. I might have to check on that, but feel free to check it out. You can still sign up till May 20th. That's the last cutoff date. And that's when it starts. Cindy Allen is, I call her the Taylor Swift of trade. And who doesn't want to have a webinar with Taylor Swift of trade? So again, I just needed to market that at the end. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your expertise with us because I truly think this is an insightful way to let people know what is happening in the industry, as well as consumers. We do get a lot of consumers as well, wanting to know what's going on in the world. And I think it's important because that's how we know why things are more expensive. You can't just blame anyone. You need to look at all the facts and where it's coming from, why it's happening. Why do we have tariffs on China? Why do we do this? And hopefully this is a way to educate everyone.
It is, and I appreciated that. And one of the things I love to watch, and there are some great news feeds out there. This isn't a shout out for a site. It's called Haystack. I watch it. I subscribe. It's an app. And then what the nice thing, it pulls all the news from all the different places from around the world. And it actually shows a lot of things like everything from going on, with Gaza and Ukraine, but also with business too. And the one thing is, as we, when we meet people from all around the world and we learn about their countries and their cultures and their businesses, it's so fascinating because it really is a small world. And we look at that there's so much opportunity that, we could be in a world that we can trade and collaborate and work closely together. We're just that much stronger and down the road. So
I agree. Well, thank you so much for coming. And we'll probably see you sometime soon. We love to have people up again because there's so much going on. And it's nice for us because we get to talk about a lot of stuff, get to see a lot of people. So thank you. And again, we're recording this episode on May 9th, just because what if there's no trade deal anymore by Monday? We don't know. We have no idea. The possibilities are endless nowadays. But we hope you have a great, wonderful, successful, and healthy week. And we will see you next week for the News Roundup. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.